Good evening, my friends. Tonight I am going to clarify one of the most misunderstood distinctions in everything I have ever taught. A distinction so precise, so consequential, that getting it wrong explains the failure of nearly every sincere person who has ever practiced manifestation faithfully and still found themselves returning, month after month, to the same unanswered desires and the same quiet bewilderment. Tonight you will learn the difference between living in the end and living from the end. And once you understand it, truly understand it, not as an intellectual position but as a lived orientation, manifestation will cease to feel like work you perform. It will become the natural expression of who you are. Most people who struggle with manifestation are living in neither place. They are living in the middle, perpetually reaching toward their desire without ever arriving at it, perpetually in the posture of someone who is trying to get somewhere they have not yet claimed. Tonight that changes. Tonight you learn to occupy the end completely, not to travel toward it, not to hope for it, not to work at it, but to be it. Let me begin by defining these terms precisely, because imprecision here is the source of almost every difficulty. Living in the end is internal. It is your state of consciousness, who you are being in the quiet interior of your mind, in the imagination, in the place where only you and your God exist. No one can see it. No one can confirm it. No one can take it from you. It is the seed planted in consciousness. Living from the end is external. It is how that inner state expresses itself naturally and without effort through your thoughts, your words, your decisions, your daily behavior. It is the tree that grows from the seed. You cannot have one without the other and expect anything real. If you live in the end in consciousness but never allow it to express through your daily life, if the inner assumption and the outer behavior remain disconnected, your assumption stays theoretical, ungrounded, unable to build the bridge between the invisible and the visible. If you try to live from the end without first genuinely inhabiting it, if you act wealthy while feeling poor, behave as though you are loved while assuming you are not, you are performing a role without the consciousness to inhabit it. This is exhausting. It is the specific exhaustion of pretending, and it accomplishes very little. You cannot produce from a state you are not actually in. Both are necessary. Both are essential, and they must occur in the right order. Before we go further, we must be absolutely clear about what the end actually means, because here is where most people take a wrong turn, and it sends them in a direction that, however sincerely traveled, does not arrive where they intend. The end is not the moment of receiving. It is not the day the money appears in the account, or the morning the phone rings with the news you've been waiting for, or the evening when the person you love says the words you have been hoping to hear. These are all effects. These are manifestations. They are the shadow cast by consciousness, and as beautiful as shadows can be, they are not the thing itself. The end is the state of consciousness of already having your desire. The inner knowing, the settled assumption, the identity of the person who possesses it, not who just received it, not who is thrilled about it, not who is still processing that it happened, the person for whom it is simply unremarkably true. The end is always a state, never an event. When I say live in the end, I am not asking you to imagine the future moment when your desire arrives. I am asking you to occupy the state of consciousness of someone who has already had it long enough for it to be ordinary. Let me give you a specific example so the distinction is unmistakable. Suppose you desire financial abundance. Most people imagine the moment of arrival, checking the account and seeing the number, receiving the windfall, the specific excitement of becoming wealthy. But this is not the end. This is the bridge. This is the journey from where you are to where you want to be. And if you are imagining the journey, you are still in consciousness, in the middle. The true end is 6 months after you became wealthy. The money is no longer a topic of ongoing internal conversation. You don't check your account with the specific alertness of someone who needs confirmation. The excitement has long settled into the quiet, unremarkable background of simply being someone for whom abundance is just how things are. It is taken for granted. It is normal. Can you feel the difference between those two states of consciousness? One is the becoming, the other is the being. Always go to the being. Always go to the state, never to the journey toward it. Now let me teach you what it actually feels like to live in the end, what happens internally when you are genuinely there. The first thing that changes is your inner conversation. Listen carefully to how you speak to yourself about your desire. Do you say, "I hope this works out. I'm trying to manifest this. When will this happen? Maybe if I do enough of the techniques." Eventually, these are the inner conversations of someone who is not living in the end. These are the thoughts of someone still in the middle, still reaching, still seeking, still facing toward a destination they have not claimed. When you are living in the end, your inner conversation sounds entirely different. Not hopeful, not trying. It is done. This is mine. Thank God this is already accomplished. You are not hoping for it. You are grateful for it. In the way you are grateful for things that are simply and undeniably yours. The second sign is that you stop seeking confirmation. When you genuinely know something, you don't check for proof. You don't look at your bank account hoping to see something different. You don't scan the horizon for signs that your assumption is working. Why? Because the person who has their desire doesn't need to confirm they have it. They simply have it. If I asked you right now whether you have hands, you would not look down to check. You would not need proof. You simply know. The quality of that knowing settled, certain, entirely untroubled by the need for confirmation, is the quality of knowing you must have about your desire when you are genuinely living in the end. It is decided. It is done. The third sign is that contrary circumstances lose their power to disturb you. When someone points at your empty bank account and says, "But you're not wealthy," it does not shake you. When circumstances appear that seem to contradict your assumption, they roll off you the way water rolls off stone. Not because you are suppressing your reaction, not because you are forcing yourself to stay positive, but because you understand, at the level of genuine inner knowing, that current circumstances are showing you the old reflection. They are the mirror showing you where your consciousness was. You have moved. The mirror simply hasn't caught up yet. And you are not fooled by a lagging mirror. Think of it this way. If you smile at a mirror that takes 5 seconds to reflect your expression, you do not stop smiling because you see a frown staring back at you. You hold the smile, knowing the reflection is delayed, knowing it must eventually match. This is precisely how you relate to contrary circumstances when you are living in the end. They are the delayed mirror. You know what you are. You are not moved by what the mirror still shows. The fourth sign, and perhaps the most important, is naturalness. When you are genuinely living in the end, your desire feels natural, not exciting, not miraculous, not almost too good to be true. Natural, ordinary, the quiet unremarkableness of something simply and completely yours. Think about how you feel about the things you already have, your name, your home, your own hands. Do you feel excited about them every day? Do you affirm that they are yours? Do you visualize them and work to maintain your belief in them? Of course not. They are yours. They are so naturally, completely yours, that you take them for granted in the healthiest sense, the sense that they require no maintenance, no confirmation, no ongoing emotional management. This is the feeling you must cultivate for your desire. Not excitement. Excitement means it is still special, still separate from you, still something outside yourself that would be wonderful to receive. Naturalness. The calm, untroubled taking for granted of something that is simply yours. When you catch yourself feeling excited about your desire, notice it. Excitement is not the signal that you have arrived in the end. It is the signal that you have drifted back into the middle. The desire is still ahead of you in your mind, still something you are moving toward rather than something you possess. Return to naturalness. Return to the simple, unremarkable knowing that it is already done. Now, once you have genuinely established this internal state, once you are truly living in the end in consciousness, that state will begin to express itself through your daily life. This is living from the end. And here is the crucial thing. When you are genuinely in the state, living from it is not work, it is not effort, it is not discipline. It is simply the natural behavior of who you actually are. Your thoughts will naturally conform to the state you occupy. You will not have to monitor every thought, not have to catch yourself and correct course constantly. The wealthy version of you naturally thinks wealthy thoughts, not because you are forcing them, but because that is simply how a wealthy person's mind operates. The loved version of you naturally thinks from love, not manufactured, not maintained through effort, but arising naturally from the ground of who you are. Your decisions will automatically align with your state. Here is a woman who desires a loving, committed relationship. She is living in the end in her consciousness. She is already the beloved partner of a wonderful person. A friend invites her to a singles event. She declines naturally, effortlessly, without making a production of it. Not because she is forcing herself to perform the behavior of someone in a relationship, but because she is in a relationship, in consciousness, and the person in a relationship simply does not go to singles events looking for a partner. The decision flows naturally from the state. Is she pretending? Is she acting? No. She is being herself, and herself is, in the only dimension where selfhood is first established, already loved. Here is a man who has assumed he is genuinely successful in his work. When someone asks about his career, he does not complain. He does not speak about it with the resentment or the apologetic quality of someone who wishes things were different. He speaks about his work the way a successful person speaks about theirs, with quiet confidence, with the natural self-assurance of someone who knows what they are worth. Not performed, not maintained through willpower. Simply the natural voice of the person he is in consciousness. And the most beautiful expression of living from the end is this: right action flows without effort. The person who has assumed health does not need to force themselves to make healthy choices. The healthy person naturally chooses nourishment, naturally enjoys movement, naturally tends to their body not as disciplines they must maintain to reach a destination, but as the natural behavior of someone already at home in their own vitality. When you are genuinely living from the end, manifestation is not work. It is simply the outward expression of the inner reality you have already established. Let me now show you precisely where most people go wrong, because naming the mistakes clearly is half the work of avoiding them. The first mistake is trying to live from the end without living in the end. This is the fake it till you make it approach, performing the behaviors of the desired state while the inner consciousness remains in the old one. It is exhausting, because you are constantly working against the gravity of your actual assumption. You can only live from a state you are genuinely in. Establish the interior first. Everything else follows. The second mistake is visiting the end rather than dwelling there. Some people practice beautifully for 20 minutes each night. They genuinely inhabit the state. They feel it. They assume it completely. And then they wake up in the morning and immediately return to the old consciousness. They spend their days thinking from lack, speaking from limitation, making decisions from their current circumstances. And then they wonder why the evening practice isn't producing results. The end is not something you practice. It is something you live. It must become your dwelling place, the permanent interior address from which you move through every day. The third mistake is confusing excitement with the end. I am so excited to be wealthy. I can't wait to be in this relationship. This is going to be amazing. All of this sounds positive. None of it is the end. All of it is, in the very language of excitement, a relationship with something that hasn't arrived yet. Excitement is the emotion of approach. The end is the emotion of possession, and possession, when genuine, feels quiet, settled, normal. When you catch yourself excited about your desire, you have located yourself. You are in the middle. Return to naturalness. The fourth mistake is checking the physical world for evidence. Every time you examine your bank account, hoping to see something different. Every time you scan your circumstances, looking for signs that the assumption is working. You are performing the action of someone who does not yet have what they desire. You check for things you don't have. You don't check whether you have hands. When you are genuinely living in the end, the physical manifestation is simply the shadow catching up. You don't need to monitor shadows in order to know what's casting them. The fifth mistake is giving power to what I call the bridge. Between assumption and physical manifestation, circumstances sometimes appear that seem to contradict your assumption. The bridge can look chaotic. It can look, at times, like things are going wrong. People allow these circumstances to pull them out of the end. They react with doubt or fear. They interpret the contradiction as evidence that the assumption was wrong. And in reacting, they collapse the very state that was building the bridge. Remember, the bridge builds itself. Your work is not to manage it, not to analyze it, not to evaluate whether it looks right. Your work is to remain in the end. The bridge will do what bridges do. It will get you there, but only if you stay in the state that called it into existence. Let me give you the exact practical sequence for entering this state and living from it throughout your days. Step 1. Identify the true end, not the event, not the moment of receiving, the state of being. Ask yourself, if I had this desire, who would I be? Not what would I have, who would I be? For wealth, not I would have money, but I would be a person for whom abundance is simply normal. For love, not I would have a partner, but I would be loved completely, naturally, unremarkably loved. The end is always a state of being, always. Step 2. Assume the state now, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, when circumstances are more favorable, when you have built up to it with enough preparation. Now, in this moment, in consciousness, you are that person. It is done. Claim it without ceremony. Simply accept it. It is yours. Step 3. Find the naturalness. Once you have assumed the state, sink below the excitement if excitement arose into something quieter and more solid. How would you feel if you had possessed this for 6 months? Find that feeling, the quiet, the unremarkableness, the simple, untroubled taking for granted of something completely yours. That is the feeling of the end. Dwell there. Step 4. Make one decision from the end. Right now, in this state, ask yourself what the person who has their desire would choose in this immediate situation. Then choose that. Think that. Do that. Not as a performance, as the natural behavior of who you are in consciousness. Step 5. Monitor your inner conversation throughout the day. Are you thinking toward the end or from it? Toward, I hope this works, when will it come, I'm trying to manifest this. From, it is done. This is mine. I am so grateful. Every time you catch yourself thinking towards, stop. Return. No judgment, no frustration. Simply redirect the way you'd redirect a river by removing an obstruction. Then resume moving from the end. Step 6. Ignore contrary evidence. When circumstances contradict your assumption, and they will, the mirror always lags. Do not react to them as though they have authority over your inner state. Recognize them for what they are, old reflections, where your consciousness was, not where you are now. Acknowledge them calmly and return to your assumption. Step 7. Fall asleep in the end. The state you occupy as you cross the threshold into sleep impresses the deeper mind most powerfully. Every night, before sleep takes you, return to the state of the wish fulfilled, not the journey toward it, the state of already being the person who has it. Let that be the last conscious experience before sleep. Your deeper mind works through the night from that impression, building the bridge, arranging circumstances, doing work that you cannot see, but that is no less real for being invisible. Step 8. Wake up in the end. Before the day's concerns arrive, before you check anything, before the news or the obligations flood in return to the state, assume your desire fulfilled. Feel it, know it, be it. You set the tone for the entire day by the state you occupy in its first moments. Let me tell you about a man who understood this completely. He desired a specific home in a specific location. His finances, by conventional measure, made this seem unlikely. Most people in his situation would have visualized the moment of purchase, signing the papers, receiving the keys, the specific excitement of moving in, but he understood that this was the journey, not the end. He assumed he already owned the home. Not was buying it, not was about to own it, owned it, had owned it for months. Every night he fell asleep, imagining himself inside it, not moving in, not arriving for the first time, but living there with the deep, unexcited familiarity of a man in his own home. He imagined sitting in his favorite chair, looking out his favorite window, the specific feeling in the chest of someone who is completely, simply, at home. This was living in the end, and from that state he lived through his days. When friends asked where he lived, he described the neighborhood with the familiarity of someone who had been there a long time. When he thought about furniture or decor, he thought about what would fit in his home, not someday, but now, not with longing, with the quiet particularity of someone who knows their own space. Was he pretending? Was he performing? No. In consciousness, in the only dimension where creation first occurs, he did live there. He occupied that state completely, faithfully, persistently. Within 3 months, a sequence of events unfolded that seemed, to those watching, remarkable. An unexpected financial opportunity, the home coming to market at precisely the right moment. Circumstances that had appeared impossible becoming, quite suddenly, inevitable. The bridge had built itself. It always does, but only when the assumption it is building toward remains stable, intact, undisturbed by the apparent chaos of the middle. I want to give you the final truth before we close tonight, because it is the most paradoxical and the most important. When you truly occupy the end, when you are genuinely living in it, and naturally living from it, and the two have become one unified state rather than two practices, you alternate between something remarkable happens to your relationship with the physical manifestation. You stop needing it. Not because you have given up, not because you have decided the desire wasn't worth wanting, but because you already have it in the only place where having ever first occurs. You are content. You are satisfied. You are, in the deepest sense, complete. The physical manifestation becomes a bonus, a pleasant, welcome confirmation, the shadow finally catching up to the light. But you no longer require it to feel whole, because you are whole already. And this is the great paradox, is precisely the moment it rushes toward you, because you have finally, completely, without remainder, occupied the state. There is no gap, no reaching, no private whisper of doubt underneath the affirmation. You are the person who has their desire in the only dimension that creates reality, and the universe has no option but to reflect that back to you in the world you can see. Tonight, before you sleep, you are going to live in the end. Choose your desire. Identify the true end, not the journey, not the moment of arrival, but the state of consciousness of having had it long enough for it to simply be who you are. Assume that state now. Feel the naturalness of it, the quiet settling of something completely yours. This is living in the end. Tomorrow when you wake, return to it immediately. And throughout the day, Let everything flow from it, your thoughts, your words, your choices, your decisions. When you drift out of the state, return without judgment. Simply return. Do this consistently. Morning and evening, establish yourself in the end, throughout the day, live from it, and watch as the world, which has no option, which is governed by a law as reliable as gravity, reorganizes itself to match the person you have already become in consciousness. Living in the end is the state. Living from the end is its expression. Master both, and manifestation becomes not something you do, it becomes something you are. And that is where effortlessness lives. Thank you, and good evening. This is Neville Lectures. I'll see you again in the next video.